Perfect. Here we go. Okay, on that note, I'm going to leave the mic with these guys and make way for your question and answer section.
Okay, you ready? Okay, so yeah, just keep it to one question for now, yeah?
First, I just want to say thanks to all of you for what you do. It's truly inspirational. I'd like to see your guys' donation to mankind. I'm truly inspired by all of that.
Thank you.
Yes, you're all very worthy role models, I think. And I would like to know, do you guys ever get like frustrated or like mega depressed? And if so, how do you guys deal with that? Like, it's hard to do what you guys do, right? No, it's for everyone. Everyone. I want all your
I think
answers.
it's kind of like the film Network sums it up pretty well for me. I think, first of all, if you're going to change anything, you've got to get mad as hell. So yeah, I'm constantly in a perpetual state of being pissed off, so that kind of helps. That's my answer anyway.
I think I can adapt a response from a slightly different question, but it can work for this one as well. It was about boredom, but I think it applies also to this. So what's the cure for boredom? Well, the cure for boredom is curiosity. And there is no cure for curiosity. So I think that applies also to despair. When you have despair, you start beautiful things, beautiful projects with other people, and your goal is to make things better for everyone else. Then despair just doesn't come to you. So.
Anyone else?
I'd say I don't so much get depressed. I do get disappointed sometimes when I see my fellow species and I'm just like, what are you doing? But, you know, that just motivates me more. I mean, that means I have hurdles to overcome, and if we don't have challenges, then what are we doing? And so I don't so much get depressed. I do get disappointed, but that just fires me up to do even more good.
Anyone else want to answer that? Okay.
Hi, this would be for Doug or maybe all of you folks, but I heard you mention the Khan teaching system earlier, and I've seen this brought up before and espoused the advantages of it. I was just wondering, has anybody from here actually sent this person a copy of any of the movies or got in touch with them to maybe do the Khan system thing, like on the Zeitgeist Movement website for speeding up people's understanding?
Okay, so, well, I take credit for that because I told him about Khan Academy. So, I've been in contact with the Khan Academy, and actually our translations team from the Italian chapter of the Zeitgeist Movement is the official translator for the Italian language for the Khan Academy. And so we are in contact with them. We sent them the movies over and some lectures, and we have some exchange. We haven't got that much feedback yet because, you know, they're pretty busy, but we're working on it, and as other people work on that, it will be even better. But I'm sure they're pretty responsive and open to this kind of suggestions and thinking, and it's looking good.
I think there's an important thing to mention with Khan as well, that the whole idea is to flip the classroom model as well, so that in a sense you're doing your learning on your own steam, and then you come in and the teacher helps run through the topic. So it's a flipping of the model. Does that kind of make sense? Is that the general idea?
Yeah, the teacher ends up becoming a referee instead of an authority figure on the top. They're more like a collaborative force in the classroom that helps the kids instead of this demonstrative force at the top that tells everybody what to do. It changes the relationship between the students and the teachers. It changes the relationship of the students between each other. And then if you start doing cross grade level or cross age level helping, where older kids help the younger kids and things like that, that also enhances what the Khan Academy does in a different social dynamic. So yeah.
Yeah, one more thing. One of the best things I heard from Salman Khan, the creator of the Khan Academy, is, well, I don't want my son to be judged by how, good his grades are. I want my son to be judged by how good of a teacher he is. How much can he help other people and classmates? So that will be the method of judgment for education. So how much can you help?
Okay. Yep. Next question.
Can I hold it? Yeah. Hey, Peter Joseph, amazing to see you in person. Everybody here, amazing work, and I thank you for starting the journey of my life when I saw Zeitgeist 1 when it first came out, and the website was just a little box that you clicked on. and all the thought processes, and I really became a critical thinker then. So I really want to put forward a thought-provoking question to all of you, and especially Peter Joseph, because I attribute this journey to you as well. Currently, what we're seeing is a lot of action. We have the Occupy movement. We're seeing a lot of legislation that's clearly caused by these financially motivated powerhouses to relinquish people's rights and perceptual freedom and all of that. And also, I'm noticing that a lot of these actions are actually not geared necessarily purely towards personal financial gain on their part, but we see it heading towards a collapse, and there's lots of talk that many of these collapses have been intended, and especially the big one we're leading up to, which could result in a one world nation, a moneyless or a one world currency. And there's speculation as to George Soros' involvement in starting the Occupy movement, but I won't go down there. Yeah, here's my question. Controlled opposition, how does it factor into your guys' actions, and have you thought about this?
Well, the very intention of the movement as a critical mass planting seed type of entity where we realize, as far as I'm concerned, as I've stated in multiple conversations and lectures, I don't have any faith in the legislative or the political institutions to be able to make the type of change or enable the type of change that's necessary, only until things get so bad that their hand is forced. That isn't to say that things can't be done in the meantime. There's plenty of great ideas that can come forward to inch in these values, get other people in situations that enable certain respect for the human condition, more respect for the ecological efficiency that we really demand and need on this planet. As far as the issue, though, of the things that you kind of touched upon in general, I would be careful with attempting to find causality when it comes to institutions, and I'd also be careful with attempting to assume certain things when you really can't find such sources. I made that mistake myself. In my original journey, I started to think about the they, as I mentioned in many different lectures. I started to think about what these institutions are, where they come from, but I didn't go far enough. That's why the entire point of the first section of this lecture is about structural psychology. It's much deeper than that, and it becomes systemic, and it goes back generations and generations. So I avoid the issues like George Soros, the legislation coming against Occupy, the anti-Occupy law, all the things that they're trying to do with that. Well, does that surprise you? It's self-preserving. It's self-preserving just like the dynasty of kings would be self-preserving. It's self-preserving just like the entire evolution of the state and its financial posture and its self-protections. It should be self-evident to all of us that these things are there. So to answer your question, the Zeitgeist movement's here to try and generate a power of thought that's so huge, so enormous, so beyond boundaries, so beyond all the things that keep us divided, because divide and conquer is the ultimate tool historically of the establishment. That's not even speculation. You can go back and read full academic treatments on how to divide people up and keep the species at bay, and so the power establishment can be maintained. I suggest you Google Hitler's work on this, because they have huge treatments on this and how they divided up anyone that was activist oriented, and this is exactly what they do today, whether they're conscious of it or deliberate about it or not. That's why, well, I don't want to go on that tangent. Unity is the way to go. Unity of values and bringing people together on a fundamental core realization of the common ground, that will transcend everything in time. And all the games that are played, all the fear tactics that are used, the terrorism bullshit that's equally in support of the state and restriction, that if you just kind of ignore it and keep moving forward with a positive view and promoting that and getting people on board, that's to me the only way this is going to really work. Apart in the long run. But just really quickly, as I mentioned, the second part of the talk that I gave, the second part I didn't give, I'm going to give the first part, I want to go right into the hybrid type of concept. I want to go right into what activism means on the most active level, things like Doug's doing, things that Federico's doing, writing projects for industry, that where you're in the system a little bit, but you're pushing outside of it. You're forcing efficiency. You're forcing human concern. I could talk about a number of different things that I've learned over the course of the past year with respect to transitional concepts, but we don't have time for that unless someone wants to ask that directly. But there is a path. There is a path, but it's going to have to come from a mass. It's not going to come from isolated influences or a political constituency.
I don't mean to drag on, but do you see any danger in this collectivism as being possibly co-opted against the people who see the value in it?
Well, collectivism, as it's been used, which is usually in the context of dictatorship, autocratic control, Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem if the people aren't educated, they don't understand what a scientifically referenced system is. It's all about education. It's all about the public understanding the world that they live in. If they understand, I mean, how did feudalism work? What was the main driver of the feudalistic structure? The ignorance of the peasants. How does classic religion work? How do they keep all these people at bay? No one could read. So the preacher was the only one that could actually communicate the ideas. And it was loaded with bullshit that supported, the state, loaded with all sorts of propaganda that enabled the power division. Education is the ultimate premise. I think the collectivist notion, a planned economy is the only way to go. And the dangers are there for collectivism historically, but it's all contingent upon how educated the population is. And with the internet, we have a much higher probability of educating the population rapidly into what is really a very simple set of values and understandings. And again, that's the whole point of the movement.
Okay. Can I just add to that and say critical thinking and knowledge is our self-defense against that problem? A thinking population are very difficult to control.
Okay. Thank you.
And I want to add one quick thing. It's important to remember they get their power from us the last time I checked. And so it's an erosion from the bottom up, not the top down. And so if you want to go against that power establishment, you just make them irrelevant. And that's by getting people off the grid, off dependency, off the system in a sustainable, technically advanceable kind of way. That's how you make them irrelevant.
My question.
Yeah, I would like to add one more thing, just very quick.
We have a lot of questions.
Sorry. Very quick then. I don't think it's, I agree with what everybody says, but the kind of us and them mentality that sometimes, not in this panel, but sometimes, we hear about, they're like us. So I think the only way the system is going to work if we show them the merit, and they would want to join because they will see that we live happier. So.
My question's for James. And do you think that in order for those of us interested in becoming educators of an RBE in the existing school system, that we would need to have some sort of formal education ourselves as educators? So in other words, would I, who am simply an administrator of a Zeitgeist chapter, have, I guess, oh wait, sorry. I don't intend this question as tongue-in-cheek nor as sarcasm, but rather as coming from a place of my own indoctrination in the school system.
I didn't catch the last bit, sorry.
Oh, just that it's because of my own indoctrination in the school system that I believe that I would then need some kind of education to be an educator.
Well, I think critical thinking starts with questioning. So you've started. It's just started today, or whenever you picked up on this information. That's the first thing I'd say. In terms of the educational system and its structure, yes, you do need. They require qualifications for you to get in, front of a classroom. So you probably have to go through their train of bullshit before you get there, and then you can start to unravel it. But I personally I'm just a drum teacher, so I teach mostly individuals rather than classrooms. But I have taken some classrooms in schools. But so I specifically take these ideas in a few different ways into schools and find different ways of getting in there. For instance, this is something I didn't mention in my presentation, which is important to mention. If you are phoning up your local school or something and you find a window of opportunity and you're phoning them up, cold calling or something, don't say you're from the Zeitgeist movement and that we want to get rid of money. Will you let us in and let us talk to all your kids about it? No, don't do that. That's not a good idea. Go in there and say, I'm from a science and sustainability organisation. Do your school agree with science and sustainability? What do you think they're going to say? No. They're not going to say that, are they? They're going to say, yeah, of course, yeah, we're up for that. And it's like, right, well, we'd like to come and talk about the sort of social implications that train of thought and that value system is going to have. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so when do we book a date? It's typical marketing technique. So, does that sort of answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, thanks everyone for your talks today. A lot of the work that I'm doing is about creating authentic markets by empowering individual skills. Only 30% of the world, though, are actually online. There's a lot of great technology out there, and people in developing nations are finding ways to make that 30% larger by sharing access that they have to what resources they do have access to, and they're growing. And what I see is the only way if we create authentic markets by empowering individual skills, the stock market will just disappear. So we have everything that's going on in the world right now, the destruction, what the governments, what the systems are doing, against this movement that's taking place, which is more like a lotus flower, that will make the clouds dissipate of the evil that's going on. That's my belief. But anyway, I'm digressing. My question is to Douglas. The cybernated farm systems that you're implementing, 43% of the world under less than $2 a day. Most of them are reliant on farming for their means to get ahead, for their means to create their well-being. So how are your systems being implemented, please?
Okay, the initial concept of CFS is to work with humanitarian organizations and governments, of which I already have some contact with, and get these systems into place into the rural areas and basically drop a building and start crunching out food. I affectionately call them salad factories. They're just going to start crunching out a certain base needs that will provide enough sustenance for them to at least survive. Does it provide everything? Well, no, of course not. But it's a place to start, and I have future plans and additional things that I want to add on later on, but you got to start somewhere. But it's not just dropping a building and walking away. I have an entire 6 to 8 month education program that's going to teach these villagers how this system works. They're going to have training manuals and all the information that they're going to need put in their native language as best as we possibly can so that they can monitor, manage, and maintain their facility on their own. They need to have a vested interest in the production system that's giving them the food in the first place. We have a lot of technological disconnect in the world today where people have these cute little bells and whistles, but they don't have the foggiest clue how they work. A lot of technical ignorance. So I'm not interested in just dropping food and walking away. We're going to show them how these things work and put 3D printing systems in the building so that if a part breaks, they can use their local resources to quickly manufacture a replacement and throw that part in so that, again, we're back to local, sustainable, in-house ways of thinking instead of having to outsource. I don't have a maintenance program. I have no interest in fleecing people for additional money on some artificial maintenance program so I can do obsolescence crap. I'm not interested in that. This is a one-time cost facility. You buy into it once, you have lifetime access to that building, period, and there's no additional costs. My company is absorbing all of that because I'm not interested in making a crap load of money and becoming some oligarchical megalomaniac multi-billionaire. I will say that I am interested in making money using the existing system because guess what? I have other projects I want to start and finance, and sometimes it's a lot easier to finance yourself than it is to get outside financing from people who might not share your same values. So I am going to use CFS as a way to do energy projects and water projects and other things to get people off the grid and independent in different ways. But it starts off with underdeveloped worlds getting these systems into places to help them live. And once you start doing that and then the rest of the world starts looking at it, they're going to be like, well, I want some of that too. And that's where we start getting into the first world. But I got to start, and the people that need it the most are the ones that are dying. And it will go from there.
Taking an entrepreneurial approach to change. Thank you.
Hey, nice ship.
Thank you very much. This is a question for Jacques Fresco, but he's not here, so you guys will have to do. He says, no, that's no slam at all. I love these guys, especially Peter Joseph. It's a thrill to see him be in the same room as you. But anyway, in RBE, Jacques says there would be no zoos, which I agree with. But how would pets figure into the picture in the future? Would we be able to have pets? And would it be highly regulated?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I mean, you could look at a lot of the scientific studies that show that pets are quite healthy for people. There's a bonding with the animal, but we've kind of regulated pets to what, dog, cats, and birds and fish, but you can't really socialize with a fish. I mean, maybe you could, but so I mean, how?
Affiliating would be.
Cats or 10 dogs or 20 birds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's your responsibility.
That's a personal choice, right? I mean, isn't the RBE supposed to be the height of personal choice and independence to a level that you make proper decisions based on relevant education to do what's best for yourself and the environment and the people around you? So when everybody's living at that level, then there's a responsibility factor that people could still have pets. Why would you not have a pet? As long as you treat the animal well and you don't go down the Mike Vick path, and stuff like that. But I mean, again, I don't necessarily blame him. Again, environmental programming and products of bad friendships and things like that get into the dog fighting and all that crap too. So, that's my thoughts on it.
Just wanted to add one more thing. Probably it's not the best way to ask, are we allowed to do this in a resource-based economy? No one's ever going to tell you what you are and aren't allowed to do. It's an educational imperative. It's does the evidence show that this is a healthy human behavior, human value to have? And if not, are there better ways to live? So it's not about, yes, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. It's what does the evidence show and what optimizes social functionality and global sustainability, really.
Yeah, that's a good answer, and I would add to this that I think it's really a question of moral values, and ethics. So Sam Harris pointed this out rather intelligently. How do we give moral values towards anything else? So, for instance, we give it. He says it's our. How much do we think the other interlocutor will suffer? Right? So if you're dealing with the rock, you don't think the rock will suffer, so you don't care about the rock. You smash the rock and nobody cares. And you give a little bit more importance to ants and other insects, and you give more importance to dogs, and then you give more importance to monkeys. Why is that? Well, because they have a more complex nervous system, so you think that they are able to suffer more. So I think it boils down to scientific evidence. Is it healthy for a cat to stay in a house? Show me the evidence. Is it healthy? Is it not? Should we consider that acceptable behavior for them? So I think it's an open question, and we should think really, really carefully about the answer.
I want to add one little bit to that too. Think about this, kind of a caveat to the argument. If my dog, for example, was in the wild, would he live longer or less long being subject to nature and its wrath versus in the comfort and safety of my home where he's fed, watered, hugged, run, and everything else daily by a family that loves him to death? Or would he be attacked by a pack of wolves in the middle of the woods 3 days into his birth? So how do you want to look at that one as well? So there's also environmental ramifications to think about too.
In all seriousness, I'll add one thing that I think is very important, because culturally there's all sorts of nuances. I get these types of questions all the time. Not to put down your question at all. People will ask me cultural questions. They'll say, well, what if I want to get really drunk? Or what if I want to... They'll bring up things that are very normal in our current culture, but we fail to realize that historically they might not have existed, and they might not exist in the future. There's levels of preference that we have that are, again, I have weird values that I was groomed into. I'm sure we all do as victims of culture. I won't list any of those, by the way. But having pets, that's a very subjective concept. Who's to say? I mean, I don't know how many pets they had, many centuries ago. We know that Egypt had cats, but, it could phase itself out. So put it in the context of culture and ask yourself, is it really a technically relevant question? Is it universal? Does it have a core relevance to the arguments that we're making, or is it culturally induced? Is it relatively subjective? And I think, generally speaking, a lot of the subjective stuff we have in culture will permeate in the future, but it will also phase out in another kind of way. For example, as a brief tangent, I know plenty of people that never had kids. They had strange upbringings, so they have lots of cats. For whatever purpose, maybe they didn't have money, but maybe if they had a more they had a better upbringing. They had a more, they didn't have just had no deprivation in their upbringing, excuse me, and they didn't have this inclination to have to resort to supplemental forms of affection, then maybe they wouldn't need cats. Maybe you wouldn't see the number of animals that you see out there with people that are striving for some type of love that they didn't get when they were younger, for example. All sorts of a spectrum of stuff to think about culturally. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Hello, gentlemen. It was very good speeches all the way across today. I'd like to bring up one thing that I think most of you have missed. Sorry if that sounds bad to everybody, but I'd like to say it anyway.
I love that. Keep going.
It's pretty apparent and obvious that we have the technical abilities to solve most of the problems that we have. What I think is lacking across the whole planet and across society and how we think of ourselves and organize ourselves is just that, is the organization of how we communicate with each other and the ability to communicate with each other. So I'd like to ask you guys across the panel what you guys would see as a, how do I put this, an I, us, everything interface between humanity and the resources that we use in an RBE.
So communication, how do we think about communication? How does our language work? I know we look at things of the issue of, what was the book written yeah, Tyranny of Words, a tremendously good book about communication. I recommend that if anyone's ever thought about how they communicate, the words that they use. The subjectivity, the lack of identification. As Jacques would say, we talk at each other very often. We don't necessarily communicate. And it's an age-old kind of problem. How do we reestablish communication? And that's really an educational thing, I think, in the broad scheme. That's a big question that is on the back burner of everything. At the core of the scientific argument, at the core of natural law, of the provable mechanisms of our lives, I think that is the core vocabulary. And that's why I talk about common ground. How do we get the species to understand and relate to each other on that level? How do we get rid of racism and sexism and classism? Well, we realize that we share all the same values ultimately. You can blame the market system on that one. The chaos of the internet and just the complete absolute noise, that's about 95% of it, is this big jockeying for attention and absurdity, usually financially driven. And that's it's very unfortunate. Not to mention the dichotomy of people's intents. It's still a thing of intent, though. I mean, we have a blogosphere that is just absolutely insane. I mean, it's just obnoxious to think about how much stuff is just vomiting out of all of us in the blogosphere. It's great on one level as a communicative outlet, but then again, how do you decipher things anymore? I mean, it's really becomes tricky, and it's a value system orientation, I think. Structurally, though, I don't think there's really an issue. It's really just the way people are thinking.
Sorry, that was basically the specifics of what I was talking about, in that how can we as a group organize better to talk about these ideas that are super complex, but like for instance Reddit has a very great way of making a platform for people to communicate, but doesn't do very well on the organization level of that platform.
I would add something to this. Get off the computer and talk to people in the real world. There's so much cyber bravado and Hercules mentality behind the safety of a keyboard, ergo trolls and douchebags, that we have to deal with all the time. People who say stuff that they would likely never say to somebody's face, you know, and so civil discourse kind of falls apart online, which is why I'm starting to pull a little bit back from using that as a medium and more prone to doing things like this and getting out into the public sector. That's why I did my Scandinavian lecture tour. That's why I'm trying to get out there in the real world and talk to people, because when I'm done talking, now we can do Q&A face-to-face, have a conversation, maybe go do lunch, something like that. You can't do that on the internet. And so get offline and go talk to people in the real world. I think we will enhance our communication potential drastically if more of us did that.
I'll just add one more thing. I mean, this is the whole point of the Zeitgeist movement, is to implement chapters worldwide. We have over 1,000 across 70 countries, and Vancouver specifically, our activism is weekly. We set up in front of the Vancouver Art Gallery to hand out information, DVDs, answer questions. We have the town halls every month where we open up the floor to Q&As all the time. We've got ongoing lecture series, And we've just got a multitude of different ways that we want to spread the word about the Zeitgeist movement. That's the whole point, right, is educate, communicate these ideas to a larger audience.
I understand your question probably in the way you meant it, and I would say this. You remember the picture that I showed that I said, this is a human brain? I said, no, wait, that's actually the internet. And that's actually almost the same picture as the universe, if you look at the big scale picture. So there is an interesting thing happening there. And as much as we would like to have it controlled and really simple and, you know, it looks the same and it's perfectly centralized, and it actually is a growing, emerging, organic system, kind of a, you know, going like that. So there are some interesting mechanisms about chaos theory and all very, very complicated stuff behind systems, very complex systems like the internet. And there are some interesting theories about, is the internet is a brain? Is it an intelligence? Is it a collective intelligence? So I think it's part of evolution, and as such, the good branches will, you know, survive and the rest will just disappear. So what you're talking about is inevitable. The question is, how long will it take? And that, I don't know, but it's inevitable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. I want to thank you very much for doing everything that you do. It's funny, whenever I hear your voices or watch the Zeitgeist DVDs, it's like hearing the thoughts in my head being spoken by a different voice, and it's like coming home. It really is really, really good. Yeah. Kind of a long question. It's designed to create awareness and interest in the subject matter. So I'm cheating in a way. But the question is, did you know that the symbol of the all-seeing eye over the pyramid actually represents 4 divine measurement systems, which are derived from 3 musical tuning systems, which, when combined in a certain way, provide the means to design the wavelength index of the visible light spectrum. This is really important because what happens is visible light has the ability to communicate all the mathematics, all the musical proportions necessary to experience what we have here. And this information has been kept secret from the general public, from all the people, and is currently being used to influence a lot of the behaviors and things involved in society.
Well, if people wanted to research that, what would they search if they were to research that? So you wanted to plant the seeds. What would they look for if they wanted to follow up on that information?
Well, I guess talk to me, I suppose. Because this information, I've been working on this for 35 years. I've been trying to write a book. I am disabled. I am not in very good financial situation. I'm not very good with a computer, but the information is there. And to make the long and short of it is, I have one page which shows this information on it. And I was thinking maybe with your permission, if you want, you can preview that.
Please send it. Send that, and I'll be happy to read that. Absolutely.
Okay, and where would I send that to?
Wow, do I have to really give out my email address?
Live webcast.
Okay.
I can talk to you later.
Okay.
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 Hello. Thank you guys for presenting. This is a question either for Peter or Federico. As you know, the jobs will decrease and people will experience accelerating psychological stress as they no longer have the ability to establish identification or social status through their career. What advice do you have for these people as their worldview or personal identity crumbles?
You mean with respect to the breakdown, or with respect to
the personal breakdown, the internal frustration?
Well, as Federico's working on in an attempt to give a positive view on the issue of technological unemployment, it's, again, like many things when it comes to values, it's an educational problem. So the panic, I'm totally unbelievably upset when I read about some young woman who kills herself because she couldn't get a job, or somebody that, numerous instances in American culture, because of the massive neurotic stuff that's been happening there, of all sorts of suicides and murders that are occurring explicitly related to deprivation and the loss of job, the loss of identity, the loss of being able to provide for your family and all the status stuff that you're talking about. It's incredible. And that's just a sad characteristic of where we are at this point in time. So hopefully with the work that we try to do, people can understand why this is happening, and then they can try to pull their resources together for whatever that means, pull initiative up to communicate these ideas, and realize that we have to start to transition this system out of the labor for income role. At least at that level, they would know that they shouldn't feel that bad. You know what I mean? And that's all you can kind of hope for, I think, at this stage. Federico?
Yeah, I actually wrote about 50 pages of answer on my book for that. And I'll give a couple of examples. I would say, well, the beginning. This is a sick game of musical chairs where somebody's going to, lose. So knowing this, there are some transitional steps that you can do to try to avoid that, and actually build another chair and, put it next to you and say, hey, you, come over, sit here. And these things would be, well, one, educate yourself using free online tools, for instance. Khan Academy, Stanford is offering free online courses. Be flexible, abandon your faith beliefs, whatever you have, and look at the evidence. So there are so many ways now to get the highest quality information ever. I mean, somebody in Kenya right now with a $25 smartphone, they can have access to more information than President Reagan did. Okay? So this is the kind of power we have, and this is the kind of power we should use. So first, educate yourself. Second, reduce your dependence for money. So get off the grid, and yeah, you want to expand?
I was just going to add one more thing. Someone actually suggested to me fairly recently that when I brought up the subject of this atrocity of people really injuring themselves and their families, this big loss of identity when they lose their jobs, I believe it's already happened now, but support groups for these people. I mean, I think that's really a viable issue at this point, especially in America. There needs to be support groups for the unemployed and underemployed, that works the same way as people that are abused in other realms. And that's something that...
Yeah, and we should go back to the real economy and to community. So open your front door and talk to your neighbor. See if they have a problem, right? Maybe you can help each other out. Now you have, free online tools on your smartphone, and you can see where people have problems, and guess what? Maybe it lives just a couple of blocks next to you, and you know how to solve it. And you can exchange time instead of exchanging money. You do something for them, they do something for you, and maybe you can just do something for them and don't expect anything back. And maybe we'll just come back to you sometime, someday. Who cares? You're just helping someone. So community, local, personal relationships, those are the kind of things we should bring back instead of money and the stuff that doesn't exist.
Jim, you want to say something?
I'd add one more thing. I'd remind them that probably what they wanted to do when they were a child is not the job that they landed in their adult life, so I wouldn't place too much of their identity in that anymore and go back to what they were doing when they were a kid and want to be an astronaut like Doug.
Come down.
Thank you. In regards to automation and all the ways that would be interconnected, I was wondering how that would deal with hackers, viruses, any situation where there's going to be a failure because of human production of the machine in its very root form.
There's two examples I use. First, if you had a family and the whole family is being supported in a home, the electricity's on, and there's a circuit breaker in the basement. Are you worried about someone who's being supported in that home running down and turning all the circuit breakers off and messing things up? They don't, because the incentive is not as distorted as it is in this culture, because everyone's being supported by the same system. So it becomes very, very, very irrational and illogical. It doesn't mean it couldn't happen, and that's where redundancy comes in. So you have multiple layers of redundancy. So if somebody someone makes a big mistake, it could happen. We're human. That we haven't reached that point of development and design, understanding automation and control mechanically. Then if something happens, it goes wrong, boom, someone catches it, another system comes in. And even if you had vandalism, if you know, it could happen, there's something called the humanity factor. There's predictable elements, because you can't predict all human causality. We don't know enough, definitely not at this point. You can theorize how it's happening, you can see the patterns. There's always something going on that's kind of hard to predict. That's why I don't advocate the rhetoric of no prisons and no police, because you're going to have something as time moves forward. The goal, though, is to slowly limit all of that by further understanding the human condition. Doesn't mean you completely eradicate those types of things. So if there's vandalism, it's recognized immediately because you feel the pain of it. They figure out who did it, you figure out what to do, what their issue was, you try to study them for their criminal behavior, put that into a database, if you will, whether it's data, whether it's technical, or whether it's literally just people analyzing directly, depending on where we are at that stage. And you try to resolve the issue systematically while also having the redundancy to stop the issue that actually emerged. Does that make sense?
So that's the social answer to your question. I'll try to give the technical answer. And that would be all the available evidence shows that all you have to do is open source. Open source your code, release it to the community, and it's consistently more secure, safer than any proprietary code ever made. In fact, if you look at what the FBI uses, they use Linux. Why? Because it's safer and more secure than Windows, certainly, and even more than Mac. So,
even though Anonymous continues to take them down.
No. They are relying on the human factor.
I know.
It's, you know. So, open source your code, and once it's available to the community, anybody, well, we just had the example of this Dragon BSD developer who found an error in a graphic card which gave an exploit to something, and then again, you know, it was something that was huge and could have been tremendously terrible for many servers around the world. And this guy just said, hey, I found a problem and I fixed it. Look at that.
I'll just add one more quick thing regarding cultural questions. That's really a cultural question in a certain sense, just like the cat question was, the pet question was. People often ask, the ultimate question on the cultural level is who makes the decisions, that classic staple of Jacques Fresco. That's just an irrational question. It's how do you arrive at those decisions, the technical process. So we're locked into this kind of feedback system we've had for so long where we have a knee-jerk reaction to fear each other and their behavior without thinking about the causality, you know. And again, there's a humanity factor. It can be a little bit indeterminate, but I don't think in a system that's really designed to take care of everybody, you're going to have some random person go down and rip out all the wiring of their own home because they feel like it. You know, it's just not going to happen like that, I don't think. Thanks.
Hi. My question is for Peter and Douglas. My question is hypothetical. What do you think will be the first thing to happen when the oil runs out?
When the oil runs out? Shit hits the fan?
Well, first of all, it won't run out. It'll just get way too expensive for people to afford.
I think we're already in the process of slowly getting past oil. I mean, we're getting there. People are, they're waking up.
The technology's there, but the initiative is not happening.
Yeah, the initiative, and we go back to that ground up philosophy, right? I mean, what if just one person in this room or watching online has the ability to start a wind company who has an RBE-minded goal? And they start getting that out there and helping to get homes off the grid. By the way, that also mitigates the what if I lose my job thing. If I don't have an energy bill anymore and maybe I have access to a CFS food system, by the time I do lose my job, who gives a crap? Because most of my bills are gone anyway, right? And so that's a different thought process. So yeah, I think we're going to, over time, get these clean energy solutions in place long before the whole oil runs out. And like Peter said, the market will make gas and oil so expensive that people are going to jump to the cheaper ways of doing things, the more sustainable way of doing things. It's a cascading effect. It's going to happen anyway.
I would say, just to add to that I agree with you, but in the interim of that, there's going to be a whole lot of chaos and unfortunate circumstances. A whole lot of driving mechanisms of war, as we've come to recognize universally here with resources and energy, obviously. My big concern when you look at the statistical projections of, say, China and what their energy needs are, and you compare population growth, and you look at all the major powers, look at what their energy demand is supposed to be in, say, the next decade, and then look at where we are, look at what's happening, look at the initiative, and you look at the percentage that's currently being pulled from renewables, whether wind or solar, it's pathetic what we're doing, pathetic. And if you track the trends, which is all I'm about, it does not even come close. We're looking at like 1-2% of meeting capacity as this energy issue continues, while people can't afford it. You destroy demand, people lose their ability to operate, they can't drive to work. You see, again, a stifling of the cyclical consumption, and it's just going to slow things down unless radical shifts aren't made, which we can all hope for.
So if you want a very detailed answer to your question, you should go up to YouTube. No, not if. It's because it's a 10-hour presentation, which we can give right now.
I love how he prefaces his beginning.
I was teasing you because you weren't there when I called you out. Otherwise, where's Peter? I was making a compliment. I was like, where's Peter? And you're like, oh, there's the guy.
Just fucking Federico. Just keep talking, Federico.
Anyway. Go up to YouTube and search for Emory Lovin's Reinventing Fire. Okay? So search up for that. He has all the data, and he has to show for it. He actually built the most efficient facility in the world at the Rocky Mountain Institute. And they're probably the most respected and well cited and ground-based institution that deals with the energy crisis and has the solutions for it. So, Rocky Mountain Institute, it's up on YouTube. Lovins, Lovins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
His name is Emory Lovins. Probably E-M-O-R-Y.
A-M-O-R-Y L-O-V-I-N-S. Emory Lovins. Welcome.
Hi there. My question relates to a personal experience that has existed within my experience with Zeitgeist since I watched Addendum. Actually, since I watched the first one, but especially Addendum, and it was resonating here, especially with Peter's and Douglas's talk, but everyone's talk, and just Zeitgeist in general, has been an incredible experience of novelty and nascency of the human condition and of humanity. That's the one thing that I experience most of all, aside the incredible technical promise that we all have, is the experience of us as a very young and new species. And that's the most inspirational thing to me. And I see it in everything we do. It's us reimagining what it is to be human. And how do we get that across? Like, this is a communication question as well, and an education question. How do we get that incredible experience, which inspired me to get involved with Zeitgeist, that incredible feeling of this is so new and relevant and needed now? How do we get that into the public?
You look like you've already got it, mate. Just go and talk to them. Get out there and talk to people. You're obviously passionate about it. Yeah. So I would just say, go do it. Find whatever your particular talents or your strengths are. Focus, hone them in. Go out there and make the world a better place. It's not really much more complicated than that. Not to me, anyway. Maybe I'm just simple. I don't know.
Sometimes simple is effective.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. I would just add that none of us here are special. You know what I mean? The things that we're doing are of our own initiative, of our own trial, of our own passion to move forward with what we're doing. We all operate, and the movement in general operates with a heavy burden, a heavy stress. We're all trying to operate in this system, but yet we find a great deal of reward trying to push forward with things that have no monetary return, that give us a great deal of insult and turmoil. I get lots of phone calls and these mean things that they say to me, lots of ongoing harassment, but I've grown to like it. And you adapt. So, that's right.
If I'm pissing them off, I'm probably doing something good.
Exactly. So, it's to each his own, and it all depends on what your threshold is and knowing what you're good at. So I'm a filmmaker, or at least I pretend to be. And basically, I focus on that. So after all the talks are said and done, after all the work with the movement, I really see my strength as a communicator in this particular genre. So that's what I keep pushing forward with. Doug's an engineer, great background, knows what he's doing. Federico, great thinker and writer, and he's doing all sorts of other things. Everyone has a background, whether it's musical, whether it's educational, and you have to find your strength. And that's the biggest goal of everyone. And that's what I think, actually, and just to extend this in a future society, one of the greatest things of the educational imperative is to find the strengths of the individual and to make sure that people are interested in what they're doing. So find your strength in art, engineering.
And we've got Michael, the gentleman that I'm staying with here. He's a magician. And
That's right.
He's amazing, and he's using magic as a way to get people to think about social programming, and then he passes on the message.
Right.
So that's when people talk about the transition. Oh my God, what do? I get emails. What kind of engineering should I go into? My first question back is, do you even want to get in engineering? I mean, are you doing it because that's what you love, or are you doing it because you think that's what we need? And there's a big difference between those two things. Do what you're passionate about and use that as the tool to then promote a better world and a kinder humanity and a way to relate to people. Don't try to be something just because you think that's what others need. Screw that. Be what you want to be and help others achieve what they want to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. This might tie into the last question a little bit too. Aaron, the Infinite Yes videos. Very short, concise, inspiring. I think they get the message, the general message of the movement over to people in a very short amount of time for somebody who wouldn't watch a long video or may not be interested in a long conversation. And they also some of them deal with very specific aspects of the train of thought. If anybody wanted to talk on that a bit more, or just let us know where we can see those videos on YouTube. How do I search for them?
You can find them all. Just go to theinfiniteyes.com, and thank you for the compliment. That was wonderful.
Check him out. He makes really good videos.
Hello. Don't want to take away from the positivity of today's talks because I got a lot of it today, and I'm pretty hopeful. But how do you think the radical transition? How do you think the radical changes that the movement expects will be able to cope with the trends of overpopulation? The trends of overpopulation.
Gimme. Mine.
Just one at a time, please.
Excite us.
Okay, I love the overpopulation question. Yeah, I'll give you the mic if I don't destroy your thought process in the meantime. All right. It is important to remember that first world nations with proper health care and standards of living maintain a 1-to-1, 1-to-2 fertility ratio, which means they basically self-balance. Third world nations, which are impoverished, barely survive, and have basically a crappy living condition, are 1-to-7. You improve the environment, you automatically reduce the population concerns. The population issues that we have are more driven by inequality and poor living conditions than they are by some weird notion that everybody's just going to have a whole bunch of sex and make a crap load of babies. If you're educated and you're pursuing your personal passion and you're busy doing that, your children will survive past the age of 5 or 6. The odds are you're not going to want to have 9 or 10 kids. You're only going to have the 1 or 2 that you want to possibly have. Plus, we also do a good job culturally of teaching you've got to get married and have kids to be a justified human being. Bullcrap. No, you don't. You can be a single, fun-loving gigolo bachelor or bachelorette or whatever and still be a positive, productive person for society and help mankind. You don't necessarily need to have kids. And so that goes back to an educational foundation and a religious foundation of the, be fruitful and multiply kind of thing. And I'd rather just be fruitful and leave the multiplication to others if they want. But, and then you've also got, again, the economic issues, Shh. We're not asexual creatures, damn it. But But then you look at the economic aspects too. You start improving the living conditions of people in third world nations, they're not going to need to have 7 or 8 kids and hope that 2 of them survive. Because why are they doing that in the first place? They know that when they get old and things start to fall apart on them, they're going to need offspring to help take care of them. If you have a better environment, that becomes less of a need. And so the overpopulation issue will rectify when we start improving the living conditions of every man, woman, and child on this planet.
Just wanted to add one quick thing. We don't really have an overpopulation problem when it comes to what we can actually support on this planet and with the technology that we currently have at our disposal. It just seems like we do because of the grossly inefficient market system that we use today. I believe there was a study in the 1980s by the World Health Organization, out of all organizations, that found that we had the technology and the resources to feed the world's population about 12 times over. And that was back then in the 80s when technology is nowhere near what it is today.
Yeah.
It's a big buzzword myth out there as far as, I'm sorry. Just real quick, big buzzword myth out there that we're in a place of overpopulation. It serves the establishment to think that way. It justifies the false social Darwinism. It justifies our ability to step over homeless people when we walk down the street and not feel empathy.
Yeah, and also, if you want to accelerate the process of, bringing up the standards of living so that people in developing nations don't need to make so many children, there is one bulletproof, 100% probability of success way of doing that, and that is the emancipation of women. Okay? So, they actually made experiments in some villages in India. So we have data for it. In one village, they did nothing. Another village, very similar conditions, just 50 kilometers away. They gave 5 years of primary education. They taught them about birth control, sexual education, contraception, economy, household management, and literacy, things like that. And guess what? 10 years later, those girls, they had an average of 1.2 children per household, and the other 12. So, there you go. Fun fact, you can do whatever you want with boys. You can, have them 25 years in school. It doesn't change anything. Okay? So, the emancipation of women is the answer to your overpopulation problem.
Thank you very much.
Hello, thanks for coming tonight and sharing, or today. My name's Amber, and I'm a music therapy intern in Vancouver. And my question actually kind of touches upon personal growth. So I just wrote it down so I'd be clear. Gandhi says, become the change you wish to see in life. And I've heard lots about the importance of the role of technological advancement in the future of our economy. But in my experience, social harmony plays an equally important role in our future. And so my question is, for all of you, what do you do for your own personal growth? And does the Zeitgeist movement have any solutions or models that inspire the development of personal growth and progressive social interaction with others?
Wow. Yes.
The answer is yes. No.
I think that the journey here is equally as social as it is self-reflective. It's really changing yourself. We can't talk about society. You could theorize certain poetries of society. We've been having this with peace movements, that apparently if you hold a peace sign, it's going to cause peace. We have people that kind of project into the world the way they think it should be. They don't necessarily operate that way. They don't necessarily feel that way. And I think the big journey here with people that come into the movement, everyone that I've spoken with, thousands and thousands of people at this point, I see the awakening in them first before I see them caring at all about anyone around them. You know what I mean? So the Gandhi notion, be the change you want to see, I think that's perfectly summarized by the concept of knowing yourself so well and your values, building that empathetic response eventually, because it has to exist anyway. We can go into the work of Jeremy Rifkin, the new science on that as well, but that's for another conversation regarding our empathetic response to each other, charging that in, taking off, the shield of indifference that's been imposed on us by culture throughout the years of our upbringing, magnifying our self-interest and the worst of our nature, if there was such a thing, That journey is intrinsic to what the Zeitgeist movement talks about. Everyone I meet that challenges the movement, I can see comes from a very internal struggle. It's not that they're indifferent, it's not that they don't care. It's that they can't handle that shift yet. You know what I mean?
And coming from my perspective, being the techno-science geek, I do get attacks. I don't want to say attacks, but people are like, well, what about the human condition? What about, interacting with people? It's all Star Trek, metal, and clean and sterile, futuristic environment. No. As far as I'm concerned, the vast majority of technology should be hidden, invisible, but still applicable. I shouldn't have to see it for it to work for me. And I also come from the point of view, the better the technical systems are that relieve the stresses on my life, the more time I have to spend with my family, to hang out with my daughter, to teach her, to go places, to do things, to connect with my friends in a way that transcends any way that we can do it now. How many people are spending hours a day at a mindless job they don't like doing, we've covered this already, but if you live in a technically advanced enough world that frees up your time, what are you going to use that time for? Talking and hanging out with people and your family and developing those social bonds on a way that we just don't do right now. So as far as I'm concerned, the techie bit improves the environment so that the social bit can flourish.
Technological spirituality, basically.
Functional.
Electron. Wow.
That's right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm just really happy to be here right now. Well,
what?
Yeah, happy and glad. What I meant was glad, not. But I have a lot of things to talk about, and right now I'm nervous and I just get lost. And
just relax.
My bad. So I was just wondering, I know there's a lot of potential here in the room, and I was wondering where could we start to be self-sufficient here in Vancouver? Like, could you hook us up with, like,
talk to that guy.
I would like to have,
yeah, work with the chapter. We
room.
have a chapter.
So do you mean in the sense of self-sufficient, like off-the-grid, sustainable community type of argument? Not argument, but type of concept?
Well, that kind of stuff. And I was also wondering if you will know about, like, common law. Because you gotta, like, boycott the corporations, right?
You mean common law, like the maritime law stuff you're referring to?
No, that's civil law. That's, I mean, that's...
common law as in harm, injury, or loss, yeah?
Yeah, it's the law of the land, it's natural law, it's inherent rights.
Which don't really exist, actually, unfortunately. They're still dictated by a concept that existed historically that is accessible on a certain level. I've met people that have been in practice with that, and they've had some luck with it, redefining themselves and their sovereignty. And
yeah, that's true.
But all it takes is a sleight of hand by any of the legal powers that see this pattern emerge too quickly or too often, and it will be removed immediately.
Yeah, it was George Carlin who said we are countries actually with just temporary privileges.
You have no rights.
You have no rights. You have just temporary privileges.
True.
If you want to know about your rights, go to Wikipedia and type 1940 Japanese Americans. That's your fucking rights right there.
Well, one of the reasons I'm really interested in the Zeitgeist movement is that it will really make all the primitive system obsolete and replace it. And about something, I totally forgot my main question. It's just, and I'm making myself seem like a fool right now.
No, man, just relax.
You want a cup of coffee or something?
Chill out.
Well, if you want, we could chill and have a cup of coffee.
Free hugs for him. Everybody needs to give him a hug.
Sorry.
Here, no one judges.
Hello. My name is Fernando. I'm from Chile. I little speak English. I learn English in Vancouver. And the question is, in my country, the students are fighting for a free quality education since 1 year ago. However, the movement is age-worn. The government has control of information, and the finality is not interested in improved education. The education is very expensive in my country. It's very bad. The people rich has good education. The question is, which is the recommendation for the student? Second, I would like working together. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the question was, what's the best education for the student?
Right. I think also it's relating to how poor the system is right now currently in Chile. So I don't know.
It's the collaborative classroom model is the best one. So where the teacher works with the students like he's basically a bit of a dummy to find out well, what is the answer to that question? So you don't stand up there and say, okay, we're going to start doing this project, this subject now. Here's how the subject works. Write that down into your textbooks and memorize it without making the subject interesting, intriguing, or having any emphasis on the student taking an interest in that. So it's more, I personally think, the collaborative classroom model of the teacher helping the students to learn about a topic and make it intrinsically interesting to them rather than rely on grades and mandatory standardized tests and those sorts of things which don't reward a creative enterprise in the mind. They don't reward creativity. You just end up doing the bare minimum to get the grade. I don't personally, that's not a model of education that we need moving into a creative, sustainable future. It's one that's based on a past. And it's starting to become obsolete, but not, again, it's another things in our system that is not becoming obsolete quick enough. And we need more people in the education system who read books like Alfie Kohn puts out there and has that disposition in order to facilitate people's creativity and children's creativity so that growing up and going into the future, they can create this sustainable world and this sustainable future for them and the rest of humanity, basically. So anything you can do in Chile or wherever around the world to facilitate children's creativity and their intrinsic interest in learning in general is a good thing.
I would add, I think I partially understand maybe some of the subtext that you're asking. With Chile being as broken as it is, as far as the educational paradigm, how would you at a ground level get in there and help modify the educational system? Is that kind of what you're thinking about, that core? How do we get to the people? How do we educate them in a way? Is that what you're thinking about? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. Is it?
The problem is
¿Quieres que hablara en español?
Yes, maybe. El problema es el desgaste. Es worn age, desgaste de los estudiantes. Los estudiantes están muy cansados de luchar.
They're tired. Yes. The students are tired and yeah, they're tired of fighting.
Okay, all right. Multilingual. Where's my babblefish? I hope people know what that means. Anyway, I would say, maybe you can do this in a better way. Community education can be as or more relevant than formal education if people start teaching each other absent of the system or what the government says. You have the ability, being here now and being exposed to this information, to relay it back to the people in your hometown and in your area, and they can, in an underground kind of way, all it is talking to each other, educate everybody home to home in a different way, neighbor to neighbor. And you can bypass the formal and the governmental constraints. And that way, people won't be tired anymore when they're busy helping and teaching each other, absent of a formal institution, until the time comes where the younger generations are strong enough or educated enough because of that knowledge base to where they can affect a positive change. They'll have the energy to do it. So I would say community-based education programs that are voluntary, they would help each other out, teaching the maths, teaching the sciences, teaching the concepts, teaching some of the RBE-minded principles that get people thinking about life and their interconnection in a different way. I think that is a good way to bypass that institutionalization versus government issue that's going on right now, and this could go to many other countries. It's the same. Community education programs are a nice temporary fix until the people become strong enough to really change, radically change the existing system by basically overtaking it, eroding it and overtaking it.
Yeah, so community is certainly one, and then in addition to that, if you can have internet there, you make them a combination. And there is a very inspiring story from India, where this guy who started the Barefoot College. So the requirement for teachers there is that they cannot have a degree of any sort to teach there. So what they do is basically they took people who knew nothing about anything, didn't know how to read, write, anything, nothing, so zero. And they built the facility themselves. They became, in just a few years, architects, electrical engineers, solar engineers. They built their own solar panels, solar cookers. So basically, they have kind of like this growing knowledge. Maybe they have just one computer connected to an internet, which is really, really slow, but they can access Wikipedia, they can access the Khan Academy, they can access all sorts of things, and then they teach each other and create working groups. And with all this vast amount of open source knowledge, Creative Commons licensed information, and all sorts of material that you can have, you can accelerate your intelligence and the development of your community. So you don't need government at that level, you don't need institutions, you can make it work for yourself, and you'll be much, much happier at the end.
Thank you. Of course, if government works with you, it's easier.
Hey, how's it going? I just have an idea that I was actually sitting there thinking about, and I wanted to share it with you, like a seed, and I thought you guys would be the fertile soil for this. The exponential growth idea you were showing with the bottles, like in 30 days there'd be 1 billion. Couldn't you do the same thing with the 3D printers? Start printing them, like really?
3D printing are growing exponentially.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
couldn't everybody have
Yes.
one like very
Yes,
soon?
it's inevitable.
Yeah.
It will come. I mean, the Star Trek replicator, we go Earl Grey tea, hot, done. Maybe not that early on, but it's coming.
Well, I'm thinking more like printing.
Yeah, I know. And
And then you get one, like you said in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's the
And-
RapRap project, there is the eMaker, there is the MakerBot. There are so many projects going on, and the last version of the MakerBot, which is the Thingomatic replicator or something like that, now has like 4 times the price performance of the previous version, which was just last year. And it can also print multiple materials and colors.
Yeah.
And it costs only $1,500. So basically, next year, for the same amount of money, you're going to have something twice as fast, twice as better. And so just extrapolate from that. In 10 years' time, you're going to have something that can produce virtually anything that you need in your house at a cost of $1,000 for the replicator. And then, guess what? People ask, where do you get the material from to put in the 3D printer to print the stuff? And I say, well, right now we have plastics, we have biopolymers, we have titanium, metals, ceramics, wood, all sorts of things. And where do you get them from? Well, now you have refineries and but in the future we can use the most abundant source of materials, scrap materials that we have, dumpsters, right? So we have these huge landfills with tons and tons of stuff. We don't know what to do about them. And then with molecular, disassemblers, we can just take them off and then the raw material, put it back in the 3D printer and then print whatever you need.
The final 3D printing level is nanotechnology.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It's coming.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good. I thought I was
ride the curve.
Okay.
And that, if there's anything that will transcend the market system and its underlying dynamic necessity, for consumption, it will be people will be able to have this independence at home to make things for themselves.
Napster did to the music industry.
Sure. Yeah, it will be the same thing. Well, right, the Pirate Bay, it wasn't just there by chance. They actually opened a whole section called the Physibles or Physicables. Right. So basically they are the CAD files for 3D printed models of anything. And they just started, they have a few hundred samples there, but it will become the biggest market of objects in the history of mankind, and it will be free up online. You can just download it, print it, and you have it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, also.
Okay, I've been following the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project very closely online, and I watched some video clips that mention microfinancing of projects. I think iGenius was mentioned as one of them. Is there anything close to that around this area that you could have access to, like in Vancouver?
I know I'm probably the one that mentioned the iGenius bit because I ended up getting to meet them when I did my Liverpool lecture. So that's how I got to know iGenius. I don't know if they have a Canadian operation sector or if there's anything like them, but a good way to look at it is to try to find organizations that are CSR, corporately social responsible groups, because that's what iGenius is. They're looking for socially responsible entrepreneurs, things like that. But you can contact iGenius. I mean, they're strong in Asia and in Europe, and just say, hey, why don't you come over here? Let's do some stuff over here. We could probably do a lot of great work. I mean, for all I know, Barry, who's the guy that I talked to, they might already have something here. I just don't know it. But have you tried contacting iGenius directly?
No.
Okay, I would email them and ask them if they have a branch somewhere here in Canada. And if not, we'll get one. And then that way they'll have another place where they can expand that concept, that socially responsible concept, like what I'm doing with CFS. So that's what I would do first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a clarifying question for Peter from his lecture. Were you saying that we should replace the word resource-based economy with natural law economy, or was I confused by that?
I'm just making a point. With respect to the semantic arguments that have come up against the term resource-based economy I've experienced. In the end, it's all a matter of how you define it. So it doesn't matter. I like the term natural law economy. I just stumbled upon that, working with that lecture. It's like, well, it's natural law. That would have to take in resources. That would have to take in the evolution of science, technology, and information. So I'd leave that with you to digest.
I thought maybe it was a better term because resource-based economy kind of has a historical precedence already and things associated with it. So I thought it was a cool way to talk about it.
Most people that use that term resource-based economy do know what it means in our context, at least in this point. But
it's just a label.
It's just a label.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
But you read the contents of the label, and it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a steady-state economy, it's basically the same thing, just different names. So, yeah.
Okay. And also, I'm sure we're all curious, how's the fourth film coming along?
Well, I look forward to starting it. I've been kind of busy, unfortunately, with all this shit. But no, I'm actually very excited about it. I'm really happy. I'm not going to give away too much of it, but as opposed to the prior film, which was very, very stressful to put together and horribly expansive financially and physically. I think I got 4 hours of sleep every 5 days for about 4 months building up to that deadline. This one is nice and paced, and it's a different kind of layout. So we'll do the film screening tomorrow. If anyone comes after that, I can talk a little bit more about my intentions for that film.
Hi again. My question's for Doug. I was just wondering, is there, geographically speaking, is there a place on the planet, or like north or south, where it isn't optimal to use alternate energy sources? Like Siberia, for example?
Yeah, Siberia, South Pole, hanging out with the penguins, maybe. I mean, relative to where people live, where we've chosen to congregate and live, there are a lot of natural energy options that facilitate our needs. There are places like the driest place in the world. Who was talking about that earlier? There's a couple of them, but you probably you can't do hydro there. There's probably no geothermal vents or anything. But it's probably good wind, being that it's a desert area and they might have good winds, but then you get dust and all kinds of corrosive effects. So it really is geographically dependent, which is why I say there's no one-stop shop solution to cover everything. It depends on where you are, your climate, what's your wind speed like at 30 feet up. If it's not strong enough, then doing wind kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. So you might want to do more solar, things like that. You go to Scandinavia, where I was doing my lecture tour, they have these long, cold, very sunless winters. I mean, sun comes up at like 9 in the morning and goes down at 3. So it's not up for very long. So solar kind of doesn't make a lot of sense there, but they have a crap load of wind. My ears felt it. So you start getting enough wind systems there because of that climate, and you're going to be able to do a lot of powering of Stockholm and those outerlying regions. So it's very geographically dependent. And given where people live, and of course, people currently live in certain places because of old paradigms. This is the seaport, and that's where all the trade was. And so we built the big city there, New York, San Francisco, yada, yada. And so then we grew up our cities out of that. You start getting into an RBE setup where that becomes less relevant, where your transportation systems can transcend those old world locations. Now you can live in different, more dynamic places, live under the sea and stuff like that, or go live in space stations. There's lots of options that people don't even think about. I'll go to space. Fuck it.
Okay. So we've only got a few minutes left, so we're just going to try and get through these questions as quick as possible.
Hi. First off, just wanted to preface my question with a huge thank you to you, Peter. I know that everybody here stands here because you sort of had this initial thought, this realization to stand up and do something different. So I have to thank you from one human to another.
Thank you. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for people like you. So.
My question revolves a little bit about your talk. The people that I've talked to, friends, family, and just others, how you guys encourage to get out in the community. There's a huge amount of resistance to even question the paradigm that we're in. And I know you're all shaking your heads and besides what I've read in your online videos and whatnot, can you just speak to anything else that maybe you've recently come across as a realization on how to relate to people and how to talk to them without, when you come in contact with their intrinsic beliefs that we're challenging?
You force them to define their terms, first of all. You find that the majority of people use terminology and make references to things that they've never even really thought about. They're repeating. And that goes to the human condition. We all do our fair amount of repeating, and it takes some time for us to break down our language and understand what we're actually saying. And that's the beauty of understanding linguistics and all of those things, and the tyranny of words. I certainly recommend that as a general foundation. But when you put people on the spot, so if someone says, resource-based economy, that's just communism, you just say, well, what's communism? And you force them to define it. Well, they say it's Marxism. We say, well, what's Marxism? They'll say, well, there's no property, and eventually there'll be no money, and there's no classes. And you say, well, why did Marx think that there shouldn't be any classes, possibly no money, and no property? And that's where you'll usually stop most people. And because all they can do is relate that to the dictators that built upon Marxist philosophy, fraudulently, in fact, and that's their associations. That's all they know. So you stop them right there. Then once you get into the property issue, and we'll use property and classes, for example. It's scientifically well known, it's been intuitive for a long time that classes are destructive to our general sense of social capital, our trust of each other, not to mention the staggering research that's been done by people like Richard Wilkinson that was featured in Moving Forward. This is really important scientific information that shows it's scientifically bad to have mass amounts of class inequality. So there's boom. You stop them right there. How are they going to argue with that? Second, property. Well, property, as I mentioned in the lecture, it's inefficient. It's completely inefficient. It's not tangibly environmentally responsible to have everyone have one of everything, which is essentially the underlying utopian vision of the free market society, if you will.
But it's the desire getting behind people's, the argument that I would get is that people want that property. They need it because they feel it defines them as a person.
Well, then you have to keep breaking their language down. So I run into people like that all the time. I've had numerous instances where people are like, well, I like going and shopping. I'm like, well, okay. you like shopping, you mean you like the acquisition of things? And they'll say, yeah. And I say, well, you mean, does that mean you're insecure? You just like lots of new stuff? And you slowly put them in a state of imposition to make them question their values. And you do it cordially, try not to be mean about it or anything. And you won't have luck all the time. It's the luck of the draw. But eventually you might crack something. And usually they won't admit it at first. They'll like kind of shunt away. And then they'll come back like 2 weeks later or something and say, I really thought about what you said, or I researched this book, and I'm kind of agreeing with that. And it's all about our strategy of communication. It's something I've had to learn the hard way, because coming into making the film series and everything, I was just kind of bewildered at the response in general from multiple angles. And I made the initial mistake early on to be a little less nice about how people engage the information. Yeah. And it didn't work, but I never imagined I'd be in the position I'm in now either. So my intents have shifted too. And I had to question my own values and go through my own kind of transition as well. So.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's it.
Okay, last question.
I'll make it quick. Do you have any suggestions on how to start a collaborative project? Because I have ideas, for instance, engineering ideas or software ideas, but I don't plan on going to school to do coding or to do engineering. I would like to get a group of people together to work on it. How to start that? Is there infrastructure out there?
Do you guys have meetup.com here and stuff like that? Try that. Different social networking platforms online. Go to universities and put up posters. Oh, I'm starting a group. Are you interested in this kind of a project or this kind of a concept? Email this address or something like that. In a way, it's kind of like cold calling, but at least you're putting up platforms that people might be able to interact with. And like, here's the project. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a meetup on it. And we're going to go to this venue, and you see how many come for the meeting, and then you talk to them and start building that group that way. So I would use the social networking platforms as a way to say, here's what we're going to do. Here's the project. I need this kind of person, this kind of person, this kind of person. These are the departments, for lack of a better term. This is what I need. Who wants to help do something amazing?
Thank you. Are we out of time now?
No, actually, yeah. Within the constraints of this facility, we have to pretty much draw an end to it now. I think we've done a good job in answering most of the questions. At this point, I'd like to thank our speakers, and I think they've all done a brilliant job individually. Matt, thank you. And equally importantly, I think this was a very positive group here, and I would certainly say a bunch of optimists here. Give everybody yourselves a hand and give ourselves a hand. It was a brilliant, brilliant sharing event. And finally, if you haven't got your fix of this yet, we are again at the Denman Theater tomorrow. Peter's going to be there. We're going to go through the movie, the third movie, but it's not going to be like you think. It's not going to be just a showing of the movie. There'll be commentary on it by Peter, and there'll be question and answer session again. And if you haven't got your questions answered yet, you will have lots of opportunity there, and it'll be, I think, an interesting experience.
It'll be broken in sections, so it's not like watching the whole film again in the 3-hour thing, but it'll be broken in sections, so it's designed to address certain issues on point after each section, so if you're interested in that.
So thank you again for coming. Thank you very much. Brilliant time. I think it was held by all.
Very good.
Hope to see you tomorrow.